Hey, Calvin.
Hey, Ernest.
I think we the only ones. Oh, there's a few more people on.
Okay.
Hey, everybody, how y'all doing?
Well, at least I can hear you now.
Well, we're going to get started. We'll just get started in just a moment. The video is now up and streaming for the public, and we're just waiting to confirm everyone's here, and then we'll get started, and we'll unmute everyone for the start of the meeting. Thank you. The April 29th, 2020 special meeting of the Monroe County Legislature will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll? Mr. Alcoffer.
Here.
Mr. Ansello.
Here.
Mr. Ansello.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart.
Here.
Mr. Baroff.
Here.
Mr. Baines.
Here.
Ms. Boyce.
Here.
Mr. Brew.
Here.
President Carbone. Here. Mr. Delahanty. Mr. Delahanty.
Here.
Mr. Delahanty. Ms. DeFlorio.
Here.
Mr. Dondorfer.
Here.
Mr. Felder.
Here.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell.
Here.
Ms. Hassman. Mr. Hebert.
Here.
Mr. Keofet Lacey.
Here.
Ms. Lamar.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Mafucci.
Here.
Mr. Marinetti.
Here.
Mr. Morelli.
Here.
Ms. Roman.
Here.
Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Taylor.
Here.
Mr. Terp,
Here.
Mr. Wilcox,
Here.
Mr. Wilt,
Here.
Mr. Udelson,
No, he's here.
Here.
Here he is.
Mr. Zale,
Here.
We will need to suspend the rules of the legislature for the purpose of prohibiting public in-person attendance in accordance with Executive Order 202.1, issued by Governor Andrew M. Cuomo on March 12, 2020. We have a motion before you which is moved by Legislator Brew and seconded by Legislator Zale. This is a non-debatable motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Please join me in a moment of silent prayer. Please keep in your thoughts our first responders, those working in the medical community, and everyone who is supporting the community response to COVID-19. Please join Legislator Flagler Mitchell as he leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Legislator Mitchell.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the
United States of America and to the republic to which it stands, one nation under God,
Under God.
indivisible,
Indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Thank you, Legislator.
welcome.
Call this special meeting of the Legislature pursuant to the authority vested in me as President of the Monroe County Legislature by Section C2-9C1 of the County Charter and Section 545-5 of the Rules of the Legislature of the County of Monroe. This meeting has been closed to the public and all legislators are participating via teleconference in accordance with Executive Order 202.1. In keeping with the legislature's tradition of openness, the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube through the legislature's official channel. Everyone participating via video or teleconference will please mute their devices except to obtain the floor or cast a vote. If seeking to obtain the floor, please simply state your name and wait for me to call on you before proceeding with your question or statement. The clerk will read the full title of each resolution and referral to avoid any confusion as to which item is before the legislature. All votes will be held via voice vote unless a roll call is requested. Following the conclusion of consideration on the three matters of urgency, we will entertain a motion to recess the special meeting and convene a committee of the whole. In doing so, we will also discharge those items currently referred to committee and commit them to the committee of the whole. All legislators will be members of the committee of the whole and able to participate in debate and vote on items regardless of their respective committee assignments or which committees the referral was initially assigned. The committee of the whole will be governed by the same rules of the legislature that govern committee meetings, and the votes taken are equivalent to those taken in committee. Meaning items passed by the committee of the whole will be considered for final approval or appropriate action at the May legislature. We will now hold the public forum. Mr. Clerk.
no one was registered to address the legislature, nor were any written comments submitted.
We will now proceed with the consideration of motions, resolutions, and notices. Will the clerk read the next item on the agenda, please?
Item number 1, referral 20-0168, accepting grant from United States
Move it,
Treasury
Mr.
for
President.
Virus Relief and Economic Security Act.
We're gonna let Jack read the entire referral before we move it, but, we'll give him a second. Moved by Legislator Delahanty, seconded by Legislator Hebert. This is to adopt. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Just had someone mute themselves. Item number 2, referral 20-0169, authorizing payment of hazard pay to Monroe County employees at greater risk of exposure or working extended hours due to county's response to COVID-19.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second, Mr. President.
Moved by legislator Delahanty, seconded by legislator Hebert. Before we move on to discussion, legislators should be aware, based on your agenda, that there has been an amendment proposed. We will first address the amendment and then return to discussion on the main motion. Will the clerk please read the motion to amend?
Motion to amend is item number 3 to referral 20169, providing that resolution entitled authorizing payment of hazard pay to Monroe County employees at greater risk of exposure or working extended hours due to county's response to COVID-19 be amended.
Moved by legislator Brew,
Second.
seconded by legislator Zale. Legislator Brew, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The motion in front of the legislature actually does 3 things. 1, it requires legislature approval in order for any additional or removals to be made from the hazard pay list. Number 2, it clears up some ambiguity in section 3 to ensure that authorization for the county executive to amend existing collective bargaining agreements is limited to carrying out this resolution. And number 3, if I might add, it is the majority's opinion that the legislature should be actively involved in any decisions going forward to add or remove employees from the hazards pay list.
Thank you, legislator Brew. Now, is there any discussion strictly on the amendment, not the main motion?
Josh Barth.
Legislator Broth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair or Mr. President. I'm not sure which under the committee. But either way, I just have a request that the changes in the text be read to us because I have not actually seen the changed text at all. And I cannot see it now.
Yep, I can read the text. It was provided as part of the Novus packet. The text changes in section 2. Section 2 currently reads, as proposed, the county executive or his designee is hereby authorized to add or delete classifications of Monroe County employees from Schedules A and B attached hereto if the risk of exposure to the COVID-19 and need for extended hours changes during the state of emergency. The amendment would insert the following language. It would now read, the county executive or his designee, with approval by resolution of the county legislature, is hereby authorized to add or delete classifications of Monroe County employees from Schedules A and B attached hereto if the risk of exposure to the COVID-19 and need for extended hours changes during the state of emergency. The only added language in Section 2 is with approval by resolution of the county legislature. Section 3 currently reads, the county executive or his designee is hereby authorized to enter into and execute any agreement or contract and any amendments thereto on behalf of the County of Monroe with necessary union memberships. The proposed amendment, that section would read, the county executive or his designee is hereby authorized to enter into and execute any agreement or contract and any amendments thereto on behalf of the County of Monroe necessary to effectuate this resolution with necessary union membership. The added language in section 3 is necessary to effectuate this resolution.
Okay, thank
If
you very much.
legislators would like, I could attempt to bring the motion up on screen.
I have no objection, but I don't require it.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the amendment?
This is Legislator Morelli. I would like to see that brought up on the screen.
One moment.
He could look at it in his packet. Do you have your packet, Legislator Morelli?
I do. I was hoping that it could be brought up on the screen, but I can dig through here.
Well, we're trying to, but just...
The amendment should now be visible to those participating.
Very good, Mr.
People able to see it?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is Josh Barworth.
Yes, Legislator Brown.
I just have a question regarding the second paragraph that just disappeared, unfortunately. But essentially, it does not. The part about negotiating with the unions does not require approval by the legislature. It limits the negotiation to effectuate the process. Correct? Am I reading this right?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is Legislator Morelli.
Yes, Legislator Morelli.
Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, based on your reading of the amendment, will this prevent you or anyone in the administration from being able to do what is necessary given the crisis? And will this prevent or hurt any of our employees, given that the nature of this amendment attempts to pull some authority away from the administration?
Through you, Mr. President, this is Jeff McCann. No, I don't anticipate that this will be a problem. It's not our intention to make sweeping changes to the list as it's been presented to the legislature. And if there is a need to make changes, I would assume that the legislature would grant us the ability to do something retroactively. So if a department came online or has changed somewhere, we would seek to be able to do something retroactively. As long as that's an option, we don't see a problem with this.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Legislator Baines,
Yes, Legislator Baines.
through you to the administration, Mr. President. What will trigger the cessation of this program? Will it be triggered by an order from the governor, or will it be triggered by the emptying out of the grant or the end of the funds?
Legislator Baines.
Through you, Mr.
Legislator Baines, you could ask that question when we go back to the main motion. Right now, we're discussing the amendment. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely. I was always a bad student.
No, you're okay. You're fine. Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? You want to go to roll call vote, Mr. Moffett?
Sure, we'll call.
Yeah, roll call vote on the amendment.
Mr. Brew,
Yes.
Mr. Felder,
Yes.
Mr. Alcoff, Mr. Alcoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Ansello,
Yes.
Ms. Barnhart,
Yes.
Mr. Baroff,
Yes.
Mr. Baines,
Yes.
Ms. Boyce,
Yes.
Mr. Delahanty,
Yes.
Mrs. DeFlorio,
Yes.
Mr. Dondorfer,
Yes.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell, Mr. Flagler Mitchell, we'll come back to Mr. Flagler Mitchell. Ms. Hassman,
Yes.
Mr. Hebert,
Yes.
Mr. Teofet-Lacy,
Yes.
Ms. Lamar,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Mafucci,
Yes.
Mr. Marionetti,
Yes.
Mr. Morelli,
Yes.
Ms. Roman,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Terp,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Mr. Wilt,
Yes.
Mr. Udelson,
Yes.
Mr. Zale,
Yes.
President Carbone,
Yes.
and we're having issues. Legislator Flagler Mitchell.
Yes.
Oh, would you like to vote yes on the item?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, amendment passes unanimously. Now we will return back to the main motion and discuss that. Legislator Delahanty.
Mr. President, I'd like to yield first to, I believe, Legislator Baines had a question, and I'd like to let him ask his question.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're correct. Legislator Baines, I'm sorry, you have the floor.
Thank you, Legislator Delahanty. Yes, my question, if I can phrase it the same way, is what will trigger the cessation of these payments? There are large payments equivalent of $500,000 a pay period, I believe. And will they be triggered by the running out of the money, or will they be triggered by the announcement that the emergency is over, or will it be whatever comes first? Through you, Mr. President, to the administration.
Through you, Mr. President, these payments would stop once the executive order that's been issued by the county executive ends.
To follow up, please, Mr. President.
Go ahead.
So if we're committed to making these payments to the time that the county executive calls off the emergency, isn't it possible that we're going to run out of the money that we're receiving from the federal government prior to that? Through you to the, Mr. President, to the administration.
Through you, Mr. President, I believe the language in the referral ends the payments by the end of this year. But I would also like to point out that it is our expectation and definitely our hope that we will not be under the state of emergency for that long a period of time.
Well, Mike, through you, Mr. President, my concern as a longtime union president myself, it's my understanding that these are now contractually agreed to via the union agreements. So through you, Mr. President, to the administration, wouldn't it be the case that were we to make these commitments, we would have to continue to make the hazard pay because we can't predict the end of the emergency after we've run out of the funding from the federal government?
President, this is Jennifer Cesario, interim CFO. I mean, right now, we have $129 million. Even if we were to have this entire pay year of 27 pay periods, we would only be spending $14.8 million. So I think we're safe to say, I'm very comfortable that we have enough in the CARES stimulus funding to cover these.
All right, well, you know, I'm Irish and pessimistic through you to the administration, President, so I'm reassured by those numbers. Thank you.
Mr.
Legislator
President.
Delahanty?
Yes. Mr. President, it is my understanding that since the onset of COVID-19 outbreak, any county employee who was part of the county's response to COVID-19 was asked to use a specific job code on their time card as a way to track time and the resources being used. Through you, Mr. President, can the administration confirm that that is correct?
Through you, Mr. President, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Mr. President, it is my understanding that since the onset of COVID-19 outbreak, any county employee who was part of the county's response to COVID-19 was asked to use a specific job code on their time card as a way to track time and the resources being used. Through you, Mr. President, can the administration confirm if this is correct?
Through you, Mr.
Broke up, Mr. McCann. We lost you.
Through you, Mr. President, people are using job codes, but I also have staff, the finance department has staff reviewing sign-in sheets and verifying that employees have coded their time cards appropriately. If we notice that that hasn't happened, we are doing time card adjustments.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. President, through you to the administration, will employees be receiving hazard pay for all payable hours or only those attributed to a specific job code? Meaning, will all hours be payable codes such as used comp, sick time, vacation, receive hazard pay?
Okay, Mr. President, this is Jeff McCann. We got disconnected. I just wanted to make sure we're back on here.
We are. Back on. Good.
You're back.
Would you like them to repeat the question, Mr. McCann? Do you have a response?
Yes, Mr. President. I didn't, after I gave my answer, I didn't hear anything after that.
Legislator Delahanty, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Mr. President, through you to the administration, Will employees be receiving hazard pay for all payable hours or only those attributed to a specific job code? Meaning, will all hours with the payable codes such as youth comp, sick time, vacation receive hazard pay?
Through you, Mr. President, the payment is only for hours worked.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't have any further questions, Mr. President.
Mr. President. Any further discussion on the main motion?
Yep, Mr.
Legislator
President.
Gondorfer?
Yeah, through you, Mr. President, to the administration, Mr. McCann had touched base a little bit earlier on how they made the classification on who receives the 10 or 20% hazard pay. Can you touch base on that a little bit more, Mr. McCann?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, I can, legislator. Originally, our discussion of this topic started with concerns that we had regarding the Monroe Community Hospital. That is a facility, and again, I guess I would also start off by saying, I think it's a topic we've covered before and talked about here before. Details that across the county are very uncompetitive and makes it difficult to retain people, hire people and retain people. But this was a particular concern of ours at the Monroe Community Hospital. There are folks there have skills and backgrounds that are very much in demand in the private sector and at other facilities that pay more. In light of that concern, and we were having staffing issues, and again, this body approved our ability to increase pay for contract nursing services. We started looking at this issue from that standpoint. And as we looked at this, we also made a determination that there were a number of other people who were working, who were increasing their potential exposure to the COVID, the coronavirus, and at risk to themselves and their families, and also people that were working extraordinary hours related to this. So as we looked at it for different options, the option that we settled on that is before this body tonight is we wanted to do something that was equitable, particularly for some of the lower paid employees that we have. We have people that are, group 5s, group 6s that are making somewhere in the low, mid-20s, maybe high 20s that are in these hazardous positions. So what we decided was to make all of the employees that were roughly, that were in the pay grade of group 15 or below, would give them a 20% pay. And anybody that was a 16 or above would be a 10% hazard increase. And again, the idea of this was to try to have equity across the board, and again, particularly target some of the lower paid employees that we have.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, was there any consideration made for those people who are based solely on exposure rather than just their pay status right now?
I'm sorry, legislator, could you repeat the question? For the president.
Yep. So through you, Mr. President, to the administration, was there any consideration made on those determinations based purely on the exposure risk rather than their pay scale?
Mr. President, Andrea Gazetta, our Human Resources Director, will answer that.
Through the president, the determination was made based on pay groups solely in a way to incentivize, especially the lower paid staff. For example, some of the lower paid staff at the hospital are receiving the 20%. They're obviously at risk. But we wanted to make sure that people who are receiving lower pay have, kind of incentivizing amount. So that's why it was really determined just the 20 and the 10. There was nothing to say that one person was at a greater risk than another because they have exposure, it's undetermined how much exposure you have, really.
Okay, and last question through you, Mr. President, to the administration. And I'm all for the pay increases for everybody, but does the administration have a position on why the sheriff's department and the jail deputies, as well as the fire department, is only at the 10% when they have a far greater risk of exposure to the COVID-19 than, say, for instance, some of the executive secretaries?
Through you, Mr. President, when you make a policy like this and come up with a policy like this, you make decisions, and there's certainly room for interpretation and different opinions of how things should be granted. But it was based solely on the dollar amount. And again, I guess, part of what would make that, and again, I'm not by any means, I don't want to compare one group to another, but we also have a lot of very low-paid groups that have a very high risk. And I determine that on a risk or an exposure potential would have made, this was a difficult process for us to go through, even with the two classifications in terms of who's eligible and who's not eligible. And if we would have added a layer into that of a potential risk exposure, it would have complicated things to a higher level. So that's really why we had to go on a system based on salaries.
Any further discussion?
Legislative Felder, I have a couple of questions.
Pardon?
Legislative Felder here. I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Legislator Felder. You have the floor.
With regard to the people at the Board of Elections, how much of that the staff at the Board of Elections does this represent who will be receiving the hazard pay? I mean, outside of the senior people. Through you to the administration. I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Through the president to the legislature, there were 6 names submitted by both commissioners were on the email of the names submitted.
One other question, through you to the administration. For the, as of right now, we still have a primary on the 23rd of June. Are the election inspectors receiving a bump in pay for their exposure?
Through the president, as of right now, these were the only names that were given by the commissioners.
Okay. Thank you.
Legislator Hebert.
Go ahead, Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, Legislator Baines asked my question. Having read today the coronavirus relief fund guidelines from the federal government, there is a huge list of possibilities: cleaning, nursing home, delivery to indigent, disinfection services. The list goes on of things that this budget could cover. There's money. So my question is very simple. Do you have a actual budget plan for the $129 million? Because the answer that was given was basically, there's a lot of money there and this will, at least that's how I interpret it.
Yeah, through you, Mr. President. So where we are right now in terms of the CARES Act funding, right now we've identified approximately about $10 million that we're currently in the process of spending. That money includes, I believe that estimate includes this going on for 3 months in terms of this hazard pay. And again, that's an estimate that can be changed. We've bought some PPE with that, and there are a couple of other expenditures that get us in the ballpark of about $10 million. I guess what I would stress with that is the guidance from the federal government came out on this. I believe it was a week ago today. We actually didn't see it until Thursday, so that the guidance that we have is relatively new in terms of how we're able to do it.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President.
For us.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Yeah, no. So through you, Mr. President, if I could just wrap up really quick. One of the biggest problems, and again, I know this isn't really related to this referral, but I think it gets at the heart of your question, Legislator Hebert, that the loss of potential revenue is probably going to be the biggest factor on the county as we move forward. Right now, under the current guidelines, we cannot recoup lost revenue such as sales tax related to COVID. I know that there are efforts going on in Washington, and we're hopeful and we're optimistic that there will be changes made that will allow us to recoup that. But what we also will be doing is we have a team of people who are looking at this, and we will be developing a plan for the balance of that money in terms of things that we can do to help our community through the COVID crisis. But a big question really is that revenue and whether or not we can use these funds to replace the revenue. If at the end of the day that isn't a possibility, we are working on a plan that would allow us to spend these dollars in a way that helps the county.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. So I agree with your assessment that these funds in the CARES 3.0 Act cannot be used to replace lost revenues. That is clearly the way it is currently written. When do you expect to have what I will call a budget for this $129 million?
Through you, Mr. President, Legislator, I guess my answer to that is it depends. It depends on what happens with the federal legislation. We are working on it now. We're trying to identify programs. There are some incremental programs that we're looking at. As an example, I would point out, we did the small, our own small business loan program that we've allocated additional money for that to help meet the applications that we have in planning and economic development right now. So we have allocated money for that. I would assume over the course of the next few weeks, we will have more details, and as we develop those details, we would be glad to share them with you.
Thank you. I would encourage you, as you develop those details, to look through the list of things that are identified in that coronavirus relief fund guidelines, and please address each of them, whether or not you're going to do something or not. It would be helpful. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, it's Legislator Brewer.
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead, Legislator.
Yes, through you, Mr. President, to the administration. I'm looking at the April 22nd document that was published, provide guidance to the state and local communities regarding the expenditures of the grant that we're talking about right now. I would just like the administration to attest that decisions that they have made regarding those that are receiving hazard pay, that those decisions have been based upon the guidance, by the strict guidance of this document.
Through you, Mr. President, yes, we have.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on the main motion?
Legislator
Yes.
DeFlorio.
Mr.
Yes, thank you. Through the president to the administration, just add another question onto what Legislator Hebert and Baines have already discussed, because I've also been significantly concerned about the budget and the indication that there's, at least the implication that there's still 114 million left. But in looking through the list of acceptable expenditures, covers everything from disinfecting nursing homes, disinfecting public spaces, the expenses related to setting up temporary medical facilities, all of those things that, some of those things that we've already done that we could be billing back to the CARES Act, as opposed to spending county, already allocated county resources on. So I would encourage you to look through that list. There are a lot of items on there, probably money that we've already spent that we could be charging to that account. So that's a comment. I as well would like to see a budget sooner than later, because again, there are a lot of things on here that we could start to be planning and forecasting expenditures on. And then my other question to the administration, a specific question, is with regard to hazard pay, is that are there any implications to our pension contributions with these increases in pay? So is that going to increase our pension contributions and negatively affect our overall county budget?
Yeah, through you, Mr. President. I guess the legislator, the first part of your question, I believe the CARES Act funding allows us, I believe it is, to bill back for services. Yes, that's something we're definitely looking at, is seeing what there is that we can go back and attribute as a cost related to COVID. My expectation is that that won't be a very big number, but we definitely are taking a look at that and will come up with that. The second part of your question, in terms of the cost of the hazard pay, the pay with this, it's our intention that this would affect the I believe that would be covered out of the funding that we have available for our use. That would just be part of that cost. We'd be able to take out of that. And actually, I'll stop, legislator. If you have any questions, I'll stop. If not, President Carbone, I just would like to let you know that Don Crum would like to have the floor as soon as it's available.
Okay.
Okay.
I would like to follow up on that, because I don't believe that you answered my question. My question was future pension contributions based on increased salary. So I'm not sure that we would be paying that out of the CARES Act.
Through you, Mr. President, this is Jennifer Cesario. Yeah, I agree that will not be covered under the CARES Act. That'll be something that we'll pay when we get our normal pension bill in December.
So through the president to the administration, so have we kind of thought about that and the implications of those increased costs to our current budget?
Under the CARES Act, that'll be something that we'll pay when we get our normal pension bill in December. Through you, Mr. President, those pension costs won't be realized until future pension bills. It won't be this bill coming up, I don't believe. So we'll definitely plan for that when we calculate our 2021 budget.
Thank you.
Real quick, so I have a follow-up for the administration. To Legislator Florio's question.
Go ahead, Legislator Felder.
How many county employees have been furloughed during this time? Or laid off?
No, there, through you, Mr. President.
None, excuse me? Was that the answer?
Through you, Mr. President, no, none have been laid off or furloughed.
So every employee is still getting paid. Thank you.
Mr. President, this is Legislator
Yes.
Boyce.
Go ahead, Legislator Boyce, you have the floor.
Yes, through the president to the administration. My question is based on the fact that I have heard from some employees, particularly in the Medicaid unit, and they are concerned because at times they do have to have face-to-face contact with clients. And in addition, they also have to handle mail that is coming through and from nursing home facilities and care facilities. If their exposure and risk to COVID-19 is great. I'm also, so I would like your comment with regards to the Medicaid.
Hi, this is Corinda, through the president. New York State has waived all face-to-face interviews. Traditionally, our chronic care Medicaid unit had the ability to do remote interviews. So this is an extension of the waiver given by the state due to COVID. So currently the Medicaid unit, and we only do chronic care Medicaid, we don't do community Medicaid. So currently all those interviews have been waived. And the vast majority of those who utilize chronic care Medicaid are in long-term care facilities or have other chronic illnesses which keep them in the home. So these are highly vulnerable populations. So it's not a population that we would have come into our building for face-to-face interviews under the current circumstances otherwise.
Thank you. I have a follow-up with regards to that. If a client does demand a face-to-face interview, is that something that is being entertained at this time, or is that not a possibility?
Through the president, none of our services have been suspended. So if a client does request a face-to-face interview, yes, we do have staff on site who would provide that face-to-face interview. What we've seen since the beginning of COVID is those individuals who are applying for your traditional public benefits outside of chronic care Medicaid, those would be the clients who would traditionally ask for a face-to-face interview, or a client who is coming in for emergency services. Those examiner staff are included on the hazard pay list.
Thank you. And Mr. President, I do have just a comment with regards to what has been described as possibly a morale issue, that some of the employees feel that it's unfair that they're being faced to work every day with the possibility of being exposed to COVID-19 and yet not being, qualified to receive the hazard pay as well. So that's just something that I thought I would pass along. I've been receiving that from my constituents.
Mr. President, Legislator Terp.
Go ahead, Legislator Turp.
Through you to the administration, what is the ongoing review process on positions that should possibly be added to this list in the future?
Through the president, all department heads were communicated with to establish this list, and some did respond back saying that they don't have any at this time, but if something changes, that they would contact HR and make us aware. So I can certainly go back to department heads and remind them of that option, but they're aware.
Thank you for that. So to the administration, through the president, if somebody did feel that they should be covered under this, they would go to their department head?
They should go to the department head.
Through the president, yes, somebody should go to their supervisor or department head, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. President, Legislator Lamar, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Legislator Lamar, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, as it relates to Monroe County Hospital, will the hazardous pay extend to the temporary workers who are there?
Yes.
Through the president, are you referring to employees who are hired by a temporary agency and not through Monroe County?
Yes.
So these would be non-county employees? I don't believe that we included non-county employees in hazard pay.
Okay, thank you.
To the president, I apologize. I just wanted to add one more caveat to that. Those healthcare workers who work for the temp agencies don't work solely for Monroe Community Hospital. They work for a number of other skilled nursing facilities, hospitals, and other healthcare providers.
Thank you.
Mr. President, this is Legislator Zale.
Go ahead, Legislator Zale.
Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, I'm curious to know what type of threat matrix was used to make this evaluation and who maybe was involved in making those decisions. I mean, we had discussed department heads, but were line supervisors part of the discussion, maybe HR department as well, county executive's office, who was involved in that decision?
Mr. President, department heads were originally contacted. Many of the department heads, especially of the larger departments, out to their supervisors and went through their list and made their assessments in terms of who had exposure, who was working extended hours. They sent lists back. HR asked questions of many departments, and then our staff also went through and confirmed that everyone on the list is actually in person working, is not on leave or anything like that. So there was a thorough process done.
Mr. President, this is Legislator Brew.
Go ahead, Legislator Brew.
Yes, through the president, I'd like to ask the administration, when were the department heads charged with compiling list of eligible employees? Do you have an approximate on that?
I'm sorry, through the president, there was a memo that was sent out via email on April 6th.
Did you say April 6th?
Yes.
Okay, and to the president, my follow-up question is, the guidelines as provided by the federal government, as stated by the administration, was published and received no earlier than April 22nd. And I feel that the criteria that the federal government put together with the restrictions for the expenditures of the $129 million, the department heads and supervisors their eyes should have been on this to aid them in making their decision as to who would qualify and who would not qualify. So could I have a response to that? Have they seen this list since?
Okay, through you, Mr. President, we sent that list to our department heads in advance of any guidance, and it was an exercise we were considering doing this, and are very confident that there were no he's made to any of the path. It was
Yes.
inquiries were a information.
Yeah, but to the president, I was just looking for some clarification. Did the department head have this criteria in front of them at the time they were asked to provide the list of at-risk employees?
No, they didn't, because this request went out in advance of this. But this is something that's been vetted by our Human Resources Department and our Law Department.
Okay, so through the president to the administration, I would ask that the administration provide this list to the department heads and have them revisit that entire list. And there may be some removals, there also may be some adds, but to certainly take this under consideration, since this is our this is our guiding document.
Through you, Mr. President, we'd be happy to do that. We will.
Mr. President, I still had a couple more questions, if I may.
Go ahead, Legislator Zeal.
Thank you. So through the president to the administration, maybe this should have been my first question. Are we positive that this type of expenditure is reimbursable through the CARES Act, that hazard pay is 100% reimbursable?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, we are. We're very comfortable that this is an allowable expense under the CARES Act.
Okay, thank you. And through the president to the administration, who ultimately determines if the use of the funds is consistent with what the CARES Act is stipulating?
So through you, Mr. President, the administrative responsibility of this, I believe, is the Treasury Department. I believe is the administering agency. This is also unlike any typical grant that we've received, in that we actually have received the money and we have the money in hand, and it's not reimbursement basis. We're very comfortable that if there is an audit of our expenditures, that these costs are a reimbursable expense.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, Mr. Crum has
Yes,
the floor.
Mr. President. Mr. President, this is Carla Boyce. I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I apologize, but I think that everybody needs to be cognizant of the fact that, I'm wondering if an employee of the county in any department feels that they were not recognizing the fact that they could be exposed to COVID-19. Is there any recourse without any kind of, risk to losing their job, that they weren't at all considered for this, and they should have been?
Mr. President, some of the question got cut out, so I apologize if I'm not answering this in completion, but if anybody feels that they should have been considered for hazard pay and they were not, everybody is by all means welcome to contact their supervisor or department head. If people are not comfortable going that route, they can certainly reach out to me and I can go back to their supervisors or department head.
And a follow-up question to that, through the president, would that be something that you would set out in a memo so that all employees are aware of this?
Through you, Mr. President, that would not be our intent. This is an agreement that we've reached with all of what Ms. Gazetta about reaching out to department heads. So to their union, and I would sure saying if anybody has a disagreement of this, and wants to raise a question, by no means would we have a problem with that and having a discussion with them. So, if anybody has questions, it would be free to advisors and then.
Any further discussion? Otherwise, Mr. Crum, at the floor.
Mr. President, you received a letter today by Schedule A's and B's. On page 1 of it, the case aid under financial services is listed as a 10. That's a Scribner's error, and it should be a 20, so that it corresponds with all the other 20s in that.
Okay, Julie.
Like a Scribner's error around.
Is this on the revised one that just came up a few minutes before the meeting?
It is on the revised one. The incorrect number is on the revised one.
That one, it's not currently under consideration because the entire item would have had to been substituted. So the only right now what was included in the original submission is under consideration.
Through the president to Mr. Clerk, would a Scribner's affidavit suffice for this?
If that's also on
not under consideration.
If that's also on the original submission, then yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that mistake on the original
Through the
submission?
president, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? So all in favor of the motion? The motion as amended, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Amended motion carries. Next item, please.
Item number 5, referral 20-0170, accepting grant from Healthcare Association of New York State, Inc. for procurement of supplies and equipment at Monroe Community Hospital in response to COVID-19 crisis.
Moved by legislator Hebert, seconded by legislator Delahanty. This is to adopt. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Item number 6, motion to discharge, convene, and commit, providing that files numbers 20-0125 through 20-0127, 20-0142 through 20-0162, and 20-0166 through 20-0167 be discharged from Agenda Charter, Public Safety, Human Services, Transportation, Intergovernmental Relations, Environment and Public Works, Ways and Means Committees, providing that the legislature convene a committee of the whole, and providing that files numbers 20-0125 through 20-0127, 20-0142 through 20-0162, and 20-0166 through 20-0167 be committed to the committee of the whole.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Bruce, seconded by legislator Zale. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. This time we'll recess the April 29th, 2020 special meeting of the Monroe County Legislature and we will convene the committee of the whole. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Alcoffer.
Here.
Mr. Ansello.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart.
Here.
Mr. Broff.
Here.
Mr. Baines.
Here.
Ms. Boyce.
Here.
Mr. Brew.
Here.
President Carbone.
Here.
Mr. Delahanty.
Here.
Mr. Florio.
Here.
Mr. Felder.
Here.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell.
Here.
Ms. Hatzman.
Here.
Mr. Hebert.
Here.
Mr. Keofit Lacey.
Here.
Ms. Lamar.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Mafucci.
Here.
Mr. Marionetti.
Here.
Mr. Morelli.
Here.
Ms. Roman.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Taylor.
Here.
Mr. Terp.
Here.
Mr. Wilcox.
Here.
Mr. Wilt.
Here.
Mr. Udelson.
Here.
Mr. Zale.
Here.
All members are present.
We will now hold the public forum. Mr. Clerk.
No one was registered to address the committee of the whole, nor were any comments submitted.
We will now proceed with new business. Will the clerk read the next item on the agenda?
Referral 20-0125, confirmation of the appointment of the Commissioner of the Department of Human and Health Services.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Hebert, seconded by legislator Zale. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Legislator Hebert.
Go ahead, legislator Hebert.
Yes, just a general comment for everybody's information. First of all, I want to thank Ms. Wright for making herself available today. We held a 1 hour, essentially get to know you kind of an interview sort of session. And I want to also thank legislators Lee, Lamar, Hasman, Wilt, and DeFlorio for joining me. I think we had a wonderful discussion. We were also joined by Ms. Crossdale and a member of the attorney's office, Mary Peters. I think it went quite well. I learned a lot about Ms. Wright, and I can tell you that it was a very valuable exercise and use of time, and I appreciate the administration for setting that up, and I appreciate my fellow legislators for excellent questions and excellent follow-up questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, legislator Hebert. Any further discussion?
Legislator Felder here. You hear me?
Go ahead, legislator Felder.
Well, I've known Ms. Wright for a long time, and I know she has great experience, and I'm sure she'll do a great job. I look forward to her service here in the county.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0126, enact a local law entitled American Sign Language Interpreters at all Monroe County Government Press Conference held during emergency situations.
So
Move it,
moved.
Mr. President.
Moved by legislator
Second.
Taylor, seconded by legislators Boyce and Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Hebert.
Legislator Hebert, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Through you to the administration. How do you determine what is an emergency situation and what isn't?
Is Laura Smith available on the call through you, Mr. President?
Through you, Mr. President, I am on the phone call. This is Laura Smith, Chief Deputy County Attorney. What is determined to be an emergency situation follows what is defined as an emergency situation in our administrative code as well as New York State executive law. That, for example, is a snowstorm, a state of emergency, a pandemic, for example. So it is a limited amount of time defined by law of what constitute an emergency. For instance, the same criteria would be whether a state of emergency would be appropriate to be called.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, to the administration. Do you currently use American Sign Language interpreters for the county executive press conferences for emergency situations such as the coronavirus?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, we do.
Through you, Mr. President, is that always the case?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, when it's defined as an emergency announcement, we do. And then also as a general rule, we always try to include a sign language interpreter in any announcement or press conference the county executive does.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, what allows you to provide those interpreters today?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, when it's defined as an emergency announcement, we do. And then also through you, Mr. President, we do it out of funds that are in an existing budget now.
Thank you, but I was more referring to what authorizes you to use them today.
Through you, Mr. President, we have the ability to do that. The county executive felt that it was important that this is something that actually gets codified and is something that is county policy moving forward. Again, for himself and then all administrations in the future.
So just to be clear, through the president to the administration, you have the authority to do this today already, correct?
The county executive felt that it was important. Through you, Mr. President, yes, we do, but also this would also expand for other county announcements too that were deemed emergency.
Through you, Mr. President, could you please give some examples of what that would be?
Sure. Through you, Mr. President, if any other elected official had a press conference that involved emergency information, it could be the sheriff, district attorney, any other official that was disseminating emergency information would be covered under this proposed law.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, the administration, for example, examples of the district attorney and the sheriff, would they be allowed to have an ASL interpreter without this law?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, they would.
Thank you. Through you to the Mr. President, to the administration, does the does the FCC already require those who carry press conferences, these emergency situation press conferences, to provide an ASL interpreter?
Through you, Mr. President, my understanding of how this works is many times when there is a live press event, those items do not get closed captioned. And then also, as technology is evolving, a lot of information is communicated through Facebook and other social medias where they are not subject to closed captioning.
Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, I didn't hear an answer to my question. Does the FCC require them to do so?
I'm sorry, through you, Mr. President, you're asking if the FCC requires closed captioning.
No, I was actually asking if they require either that or a ASL interpreter. My understanding.
Point of order, Mr. President. I'm not sure how this question pertains to the item in front of us.
I think it pertains. I'm going to let Legislator Hebert proceed with his questions. Go ahead, Legislator Hebert.
I'm still waiting for an answer if the FCC requires this already.
Why don't you repeat the
law.
question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Legislator, if you wouldn't mind repeating the question through you, Mr. President.
I'm happy to do so. Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, does the Federal Communication Commission already require ASL interpreters or closed captioning for these types of events by federal law?
I'm sorry, Legislator, if you wouldn't mind repeating I don't believe they do, but if Laura Smith would care to answer that as well, I would appreciate it if she could just clarify that.
I apologize. I don't have the answer at this time. I can work to get the answer. I believe the answer is no. There's certainly instances in which there's been communications by other municipal authorities and government authorities that have not provided ASL interpreters. Another comment I will make is that there is a significant amount of consumption of emergency correspondence through social media, which of course might find a different path in which individuals in our community are consuming news, which is outside of the FCC's regulations.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, the administration, I do understand that, but this does not talk about this, as I understand it, this referral doesn't refer to anything other than essentially the press conferences for emergency actions. The next question is really simple. How are you going to mandate to the local news channels that they include these ASL interpreters on screen?
Through you, Mr. President, that's something we can't mandate how the media covers the ASL interpreters, but we have made it a practice of Facebook living our media events, and we're always set up in terms of having the interpreter picture. One thing I will say, and again, I have noticed myself since we've instituted this practice, there is a discrepancy between different news organizations and how they cover things. And how they present that information. What I'm confident will happen is that members of the deaf community, and as you know, we have one of the largest deaf and hard of hearing populations in the country, will be in a position where they tune in to media outlets that actually cover them. And I know there are some that have a better practice of that than others, but really the motivation for this was really meeting with advocates and them expressing their concern that too many times they feel as though they're left out and not included, and something important and significant is going on, and there's no way without an interpreter that they're going to be presented this information. At least this way, they're going to be able to get it through our Facebook or other media that's more sensitive to their needs. We'll have the option of providing them content that they can use.
Through you, the administration, Mr. President, what's the estimated cost of this action?
Through you, Mr. President, we estimate a cost of approximately just under $250 per press conference. So, you know, it's not. We don't anticipate this to be a major cost county or burden to the county financially.
Last question, just to be sure. Your statement earlier was that you already have the authority to do this without this law, correct?
Yes, we do.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, any further discussion?
Mr. President, this is Mike Zale.
Yes, Legislator Zale.
Through you, Mr. President, I'm wondering if the administration could just clarify one thing for me. Is this individual going to be a county employee? Have we hired somebody?
Through you, Mr. President, no, we are not. We do this through contracted services.
Okay, thank you. And through the President of the administration, was there any consideration for having an ASL interpreter for all press conferences?
Through you, Mr. President, as a practice, that's a practice that we've adopted. The county executive has informally, but we decided not to mandate in this proposed legislation.
Okay, thank you. Then final question. Thank you for answering these. Through you to the administration, through the President to the administration, if you have an active practice of having an interpreter, maybe this goes on the lines of Legislator Hebert's questions, but if you have a practice of doing this at all press conferences, could you explain the purpose for this being a referral?
Through you, Mr. President, sure. You know, County Executive Bello isn't going to be County Executive forever. We thought this was something that was important to make a statement to the deaf and hard of hearing community that we appreciated their needs to have access to this information, and we thought it was important enough to actually adopt a local law that will ensure that this is the policy of the county during County Executive Bello's tenure and beyond that.
So thank you. And again, so then this is my final question. I guess I'm just not sure why it wouldn't be important enough to have for every press conference through you, Mr. President, to the administration.
Through you, Mr. President, the reason why we've decided to go this route is in at least one meeting I was a part of. There may have been more meetings. The advocates for the deaf and hard of hearing community had specifically asked for the emergency press conferences to be provided with ASL interpreters. They did not ask for anything beyond that. And while that is something we've adopted as an internal policy, we decided not to include it in this referral.
Thank you.
Legislator Hebert.
Mr. President.
Yes, Legislator Baines.
I'd like to offer through you to the administration my deep appreciation of your sensitivity to one of the most important communities. All of our communities are important, one that's been often neglected. And I think that the fact that you're referring this for emergency meetings reflects the fraught nature of emergencies and how they affect communities in a very profound way. I want to offer my appreciation and indicate that I plan on voting yes on this referral. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I also would like to have a comment.
Go ahead, legislator.
Through you, Mr. President, I would like to congratulate the administration for this important step. As Mr. McCann mentioned, Rochester and Monroe County I feel has the largest per capita deaf and hard of hearing community. And for deaf people and the hard of hearing, access to sign language is key to breaking down communication barriers and participating in society just like everyone else. The rights of deaf people to access schools, medical treatment, or court hinges on their ability to use their own language. So again, I want to congratulate the administration for making this making us a more fair and equitable community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Legislator Hebert, last question.
Legislator Hebert.
Yes, just one last question.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure why. I guess you're having trouble hearing me. Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, would we have to delay an emergency press conference to say the sign language interpreter on their way in, car broke down, got in an accident, stopped by police, whatever? Would we have to delay the conference, say Gannett had a steam explosion and winds were blowing out of the east? We have to delay the conference if this law is in place for the ASL interpreter.
Through you, Mr. President, I would like to ask Ms. Smith if she could answer that.
Yes, I'd be happy to. The first observation is, again, we do have the largest community per capita. So in the first instance, we do not expect to not be able to find an interpreter. If there is an instance in which a visual press conference has been called and an interpreter is not available, this law would contemplate that visual press conference could not go forward, but certainly any other written communication in the state of emergency could certainly be distributed at a moment's notice. That would not slow down the distribution of information. It's just a visual press conference, in addition to a number of other details that would need to be worked out for a press conference, location, and ensuring that the press is available and is aware. This is another detail that would need to be considered before a press conference is called, but it would not stop the distribution of information.
Through you, Mr. President, just to be sure the answer to that question was yes, we'd have to delay a press conference.
I didn't get that.
Through you, Mr. President, correct. We would have to delay a press conference until sign language interpreter is available.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to comment, explain my vote. I will be voting in favor of this. I absolutely want to support the deaf community. I have family members who have great friends and they're at my house quite frequently. And bottom line is, we need to do this. I just wanted to make sure I understood the ramifications. Thank the administration for their forthright answer.
Any further discussion?
Legislator Barroth.
Go ahead, Legislator Barroth.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make a brief statement. I just want to say that I like what the administration is doing in terms of striking a balance between setting a standard, and I think it's a good standard to have interpreters present, but also recognizing that, when in an emergency situation, communities should all be communicated with. It should not just be a standard, but in fact, it should be an obligation. And I do think there's a good local law for that reason. It should be an obligation and not something that we can pass by or just do if we have the time and the ability at that moment. So I'm very pleased by this and I'm very comfortable voting in the affirmative. Thank you.
Very good.
Legislator Roman.
Go ahead, Legislator Roman.
I also want to say thank you as an advocate for language access. It's a great step forward in ensuring that the community, the deaf community and the hard of hearing community are receiving the message in a way that is getting through to them. Oftentimes we think closed captioning is enough. It is not. ASL is the form of communication used by many people in our community, and we should really be doing this.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Before I read the next item, I would just ask if there's any members of the administration that are participating via phone that are also watching the video via the YouTube Live feed, if they could please mute the audio from their YouTube Live. It's creating feedback into the call, so thank you. Our next item is referral number 20-0127, confirmation of the appointment of the Director of Safety.
Mr. President.
By Legislator Turp. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Barnhart.
Yes, Legislator Barnhart.
Through the President to the administration, can you describe the recruitment process for the Director of Public Safety position?
Sure. Through you, Mr. President. We advertised the position on Indeed.com. We received 74 applications. We actually, through a process, we interviewed 2 candidates, and Chief Tantello was selected as our candidate.
Through the President to the administration, according to the Civil Service Commission website, only 7 of the 70 people that the applications that came in through Indeed and MonroeCounty.gov were deemed qualified, and all were retirees. But Chief Tantello was not a retiree at the time he was offered this position. Is that correct?
Chief Tantillo was not a retiree when he was offered the position.
Through the President to the administration, then why is he getting a 211 waiver?
Through you, Mr. President. What we did is, as I said earlier, we advertised the position, had 70 plus applications come in. Through internally, we shortlisted some candidates that, in a general sense, met the requirements, or not the requirements, but rather the qualifications that we thought were important. And as you point out, most of those people, I think all of those people on the short list would have been retirees, and they also would have been in a position to seek and request a 211 waiver. And a 211 waiver is something that is very common in the law enforcement community, and also, given the nature of the position, we made a determination that we wanted someone with prior governmental experience, and as a result of that, we decided that Chief Tantillo was the best candidate for the position for a number of factors, which maybe we can get into in future questions tonight. But we thought he was the best candidate, and again, I would stress anybody else who would have had the background we were looking for also would have been seeking a 211 waiver.
Yeah, under the law, there's only 2 reasons you're supposed to give a 211 waiver: through the President to the administration. You know, you have to have an urgent need, and you cannot find anyone else. My issue with this is that 211 waivers should not be commoditized. Chief Tantello didn't retire to and then take this job. He went from one job to another job. And so he's being allowed to double dip as a perk. And yes, this is only allowed for law enforcement mostly, but the state has greatly reduced the use of 211 waivers because they have been abused. I find it very hard to believe that at the salary that we're paying, and frankly, just advertising on Indeed when there's an extensive law enforcement community, that, and I have no doubt that he's qualified and even the best qualified, but 211 waivers are not supposed to be used this way, particularly when he only has another year when he would have been able to double dip without this waiver. It should not be commoditized this way. And in fact, SUNY Brockport faced a lawsuit, I don't know what the status of it is, over this very issue of there possibly being other qualified applicants. Most public service sectors are not allowed to do this. I don't think it should be allowed in this case either. I will be voting in the affirmative because he's already in the job and we're in a public emergency. But I did want to make this point, and I really hope the administration doesn't use these waivers like this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Legislator Morelli.
Yes, Legislator Morelli.
Mr. President, I think just to explain my vote, both you and I, being men of Irondequoit, know how great Chief Tantillo has been for our community, and the great respect that people, not only in our town of Irondequoit, but all over in the law enforcement community, I'm sure Legislator Dondorfer would agree as well, the overall respect that Chief Tantillo has. I've known the chief when he was Officer Tantillo, and would come to my third grade class to discuss the DARE program and the importance of not using drugs. So I've known him for a long time, and he is not only a dear friend, but I think someone who's extremely well qualified for this position, someone who's extremely well respected in all parts of our community. And it is, well, it's a little bit of a sad day for Irondequoit that he's not going to be our chief, and I'll certainly miss him at glow stick parades around Irondequoit. I think I could probably convince him to come even in his current position. But just truly an amazing person, and I'm so proud to be able to support him tonight for this position. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I agree. A very good friend, very well qualified. I agree. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0142, enact a local law amending the Monroe County Charter to change the date for filling vacancies in the Monroe County Legislature.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Taylor, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Before the discussion, I'd just like to clear this up. I'm proposing this local law to amend the Monroe County Charter to change the date for filing vacancies in the Monroe County Legislature. The charter currently states the threshold date for a vacancy triggering an election at the next general election is September 20th. New York State election law states that a vacancy occurring 3 months before the general election in any year in any office authorized to be filled at a general election, except in the offices of governor, lieutenant governor, or United States senator, shall be filled at the general election held next thereafter, unless otherwise provided by the Constitution, or unless otherwise provided by the Constitution, or unless previously filled at a special election. Enacting this local law to amend the charter will bring Monroe County into compliance and consistency with New York State election law by changing the threshold date from September 20th to 3 months before the general election in any year. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0143, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services for the LifeScan Equipment Grant Program.
Move
Moved
it,
by
Mr.
Legislator Boyce,
President.
seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0144, acceptance of a grant from the United States Department of Justice, United States Marshal Service, Western New York, District of New York, the United States Marshal Service, New York, New Jersey, Regional Fugitive Task Force, Rochester Division.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Boyce, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0145, authorize a contract with the University of Rochester for continuing development and sustainment of the county's medical countermeasure program.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Boyce, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President, this is
Yes.
Linda Hasman. I would like to declare that I'm an employee of the University of Rochester.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. President, I would also like to declare that my wife is a nurse at the University of Rochester.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0146, authorize the creation of one new position in the Public Defender's Office as part of Year 2 funding of the statewide expansion of the Hurley Herring Project Grant.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. President. Legislator Boyce.
Legislator Boyce, you have the floor.
Yes, yes, through the president to the administration. Is this the position that was created for the Chief Diversity Officer at the Public Defender's Office?
The administration got that question?
This is the public defender, Tim Donaher. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is the position that will be responsible for recruitment and diversity. Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Donaher. I just wanted to commend you and your staff for such a position. I think it was definitely deemed necessary as our previous discussions and legislative meetings, and I want to thank you for doing so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, this is Legislator Lamar.
Go ahead, Legislator Lamar.
I just have a comment. I would also like to thank Mr. Donaher for hearing the needs of this community and acting on it swiftly. And I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Legislator Flagler Mitchell. I also want to
Legislator Flagler
thank.
Mitchell.
Yep, I also want to thank Mr. Donahue for acting on the concerns in which we had when we talked about diversity in the public defender and conflict defender's office. So thank you for that. And looking forward to seeing the results.
Thank you. Thank you.
Legislator Felder here.
Legislator Felder.
I want to echo the comments of the last speaker. I only want to add that I still look forward to sitting down with the public defender and now that this new individual will be on board, once they're selected, we'll have a discussion about direction of the office and how it can better serve our community.
Any further
Through you,
discussion?
Mr. President, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that.
Mr. President, Legislator Brew.
Legislator Brew.
Yes, I have a question for the public defender. At the last appearance at the legislative session, it was agreed that the public defender's office was going to develop a revised plan
Wait a minute, Legislator Brew, you broke up. You'll have to repeat that.
Okay, I'm sorry. When the public defender last appeared at the county legislative meeting, he stated that the public defender's office was going to be revising its hiring plan to attract minority public defenders. My question is, has this plan already been developed, or will this plan diversity officer?
Through the president, yes, the outline of the plan has been developed, but certainly one of the most significant components of the plan was to retain a diversity officer to implement the plan. So certainly once this staff person starts in the public defender's office, we have a plan in place for, well, as soon as the COVID pandemic ends, for recruitment and a variety of means, both at job fairs at a variety of schools that graduate minority attorneys to doing our own online job fairs. But the first step in implementation of that plan is, of course, hiring our diversity officer.
Well, thank you. And a follow-up question to that. With the new position, with the new diversity officer have the ability to provide input to modify that existing plan as is today?
Legislator Brew, you broke up.
Oh, I'm sorry. My follow-up question was, will the new appointee, the chief diversity officer, have the opportunity to modify the hiring plan once he is appointed and has taken his position?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, absolutely. Once she begins her position, and we've already had some discussions already about her thoughts on how that plan would be effectively implemented.
Thank you.
Good. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0147, authorize an undertaking for the New York State Department of Transportation to allow future county utility and non-utility work in state right-of-ways.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator Wilt, seconded by Legislator Smith. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President, this is Legislator Smith.
Go ahead, Legislator Smith, you have the floor.
Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, has this authorization ever come before the legislature before?
This is Tim Freeler, Director of Transportation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Tim.
Yes. We've had a previous undertaking has been in effect since 2002. It's good for 20 years. The state has made some recent changes to it and asked us to just adopt this new one to get it up to date. It'll be good for another 20 years thereafter.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, another question to the administration. Does this permit authorize this work to be done under the Executive Order 202.6?
Through you, Mr. President, no, this is just for routine and any other permitted work that we are doing for county roads that are abutting state highways, highway lighting work, and anything else that we're undertaking. It's not related to any of the executive orders.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0148, acceptance of an offer and payment for appropriation by State of New York of property at 1870 Mount Hope Avenue in the city of Rochester for the Mount Hope Avenue Improvement Project.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Mr. Wilk, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Joshua Barth.
Legislator Baroff? Yeah, go ahead, Legislator Baroff.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, what is on this property currently?
Through the President, Tim Murphy, Director of Real Estate. This is at the corner of Westfall and Mount Hope near the 111 Westfall facility. It's the very corner. They're going to put the sidewalk and some turn lane improvements in as part of the overall Mount Hope sidewalk project and improvements.
Thank you. You anticipated my next question, so I'll skip to the last question. Through the President to you, will these three parcels remain with the state or return back to us after the end of the project?
Through the President, they are acquiring permanent easements on these as these are basically falling under the jurisdiction of the city of Rochester. So the city and the county take easements versus fee takings they usually take.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Item carries.
Referral 20-0149, acceptance of a grant from New York State of Mental Health for the PFC Dwyer Veteran Peer-to-Peer Support Program and authorize a contract with Compeer, Inc.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Hebert, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. President. This is Carla Boyce. I have a question with regards to this through the President to the administration. I wondered who else responded to the RFP that was put out.
Through you, Mr. President, this is Nick from Veteran Services. The last time that we put the contract out to bid, there were two organizations that bid on it, Veterans Outreach Center and Compeer.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Legislator Smith. Through you,
Legislator
Mr. President. Through you, Mr. President. To the administration, will they be using any virtual or online resources be expanded during the current situation we're in?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, they are all of these services that were offered in the past are currently being offered through online Zoom activities such as painting and cooking and things like that. If there are veterans in the program that do not have the resources to be a part of that, we get them the resources to be a part of it. And if they don't have the equipment to participate in the classes, we deliver the equipment to their homes.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0150, acceptance of a grant from Health Research, Inc. for the Expanded Partner Services Initiative.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Hebert, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries.
151, authorize an intermunicipal agreement with the Spencerport Central School District for the purchase of fuel for vehicles of the Monroe County Sheriff's Office.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Howlkoffer, seconded by Legislators Boyce and Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Joshua Barros.
Legislator Barov.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, in prior years, fuel agreements were set not to exceed a certain amount. Is there a cap on the amount in this agreement through the president?
Kim Hinckley, the Sheriff's Office, through the President. No, there is not.
So through the president to the administration, in the past years, there was a cap of like $10,000, I think it was. Why is there not a cap this time around through the president?
Through the President, I'll have to get back to you on that, sir.
Okay. Through the president, I'll just say that, I don't anticipate that that'll be an issue given the prices of fuel is so low right now. But, things change. So if you could get back to us by the full ledge meeting, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Through the President, absolutely.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0152, adopt a climate smart communities resolution.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator Dondorfer, seconded by Legislator Ansello. As this legislator knows, we've put into place a Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee to form a climate action plan and advise the legislature on sustainability practices. As president, I feel adopting this resolution now is putting the cart before the horse. It is the legislature advising the committee rather than the committee advising the legislature. I first would like to hear the committee's recommendation on this matter before having the legislator address it. Therefore, I am hereby referring this matter to the Climate Action Plan Committee. Next item.
Referral 20-0153, acceptance of Regional Council Award grant funding from New York State Urban Development Corporation, doing business as Empire State Development for the Frontier Field Improvement Project.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Dondorfer, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0154, authorize a lease agreement with the Monroe County Soil and Water Conservation District and authorize a contract for the stormwater management consulting services.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator Dondorfer, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0155, authorize contracts with C.J. Brown Energy and Engineering, PC, and M&E Engineering, PC, for energy term services.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Dondorfer, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0156, authorize contracts with Steve General Contractor, Inc., Crosby Brownlee, Inc., Michael A. Ferrallo Plumbing and Heating, Inc., and Hewitt Young Electric, LLC, for the Hall of Justice Courtroom Improvements Project.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Legislator Dunn, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Barra.
Legislator Barov.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, were there any other respondents aside from Hewitt Young Electric LLC for the electrical components of the project?
Through you, Mr. President, this is Mike Garland from DES. No, there were no other respondents for that particular bid.
Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0157, authorize a contract with Bergman Associates Architects, Engineers, Landscape Architects, and Surveyors, DPC, for professional design services for the Monroe Community College Property Preservation Phase 3 project.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Dondorfer, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Barra.
Legislator Barra.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, has the phase commenced already or not?
Through you, Mr. President, could you repeat the question?
Yes. Has this phase of the design, the property development commenced already or not?
Through you, Mr. President, again, this is Mike Garland from DES. No, this work has not progressed.
Okay, thank you. And through the President's administration, did anyone else bid for this project?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, there were 9 consulting firms that submitted a proposal. 9 were shortlisted, and
19 to the UI.
Okay.
Page 2.
Okay, excuse me. I stand corrected. There were 19 firms that responded to the expression of interest. 9 firms were shortlisted, and their proposals were considered. Bergman was selected as the most qualified.
Thank you. And of the 9 that were considered, I'm assuming they were all qualified?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, they were.
Thank you. And of the 9 who were not considered most qualified, did you get cost estimates from them as well?
Through you, Mr. President, this is a qualifications-based selection process, which is what we do for professional services.
Okay. Through the President, we have a cost amount here. Are you telling me that it would be the same cost amount for anybody, President?
Through you, Mr. President, as part of the consultant selection process, which again is a consultant-based or qualifications-based process, we select the firm that we believe to be most qualified for that particular project. Once that firm is selected, again, their selection is based on qualifications or proposal. We will work with the firm to develop the scope and fee. Once the fee is established, then we go before your honorable body and ask for authorization to enter into a contract with that consultant.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0158, authorize contracts with DeMarco Constructors LLC for construction management services, DePasquale Construction Corporation, Bell Mechanical Contractor, Inc., Michael A. Fiorello Plumbing and Heating, Inc., and Kaplan Schmidt Electric, Inc. for the Monroe County Public Safety second and third floor renovation project.
Move it, Mr. President.
Moved by Legislator Dondorfer, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0159, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services for the fiscal year 2020 Cybersecurity Targeted Grant Program.
Move it,
By
Mr.
Legislator
President.
Delahanty, seconded by Legislator Hebert. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0160, authorize the sale of county-owned tax foreclosure property located at 208 Garfield Street in the town/village of East Rochester.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Delahanty, seconded by Legislator Hebert.
Mr.
Is there
President.
any discussion?
Mr.
Yes.
President, Legislator Baines.
Go ahead, Legislator Baines.
Does this property have a structure on it, or is it an empty lot? Through you, Mr.
To the
President.
President, Tim Murphy, Director of Real Estate. It's an empty lot.
Got it, thank you.
This is Legislator Barroth.
Legislator Barrett.
Thank you.
I've been saying Baroth all these years. How do you?
That's okay, I don't mind.
I think I've been saying it incorrectly.
Everybody does.
That's okay.
No worries. So through you, Mr. President, just a quick question. I know we've had this property for nearly 3 years now. What took so long to sell it, or just we didn't want to sell it earlier through the president?
Through the President, Tim Murphy, it's been up for auction before. It's never been bid on. The current buyer happens to be an adjoining owner that will, enhance some utilization for his other property.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes, Legislator B.
Legislator Bay, through you to the administration. This property is located again across from the busiest church entrance in East Rochester, and the empty lot is right where all the people come in and out of church. The adjoining property, is it the restaurant located in on that corner that's acquiring it?
It's on the other street. I'm trying to remember what the business is. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yes, if it is the restaurant and they were to want to do outside dining or something in that location, it might be a sensitive location. Could you check on that prior to our general meeting, please?
I can certainly check on that. I mean, any use of the property would be controlled by the village.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0161, authorize the sale of county-owned tax foreclosure property located at 62 Seaview Avenue in the town of Arundel.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Delhanty, seconded by Legislator Hebert. Is there discussion?
Legislator Hebert.
Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration. Clearly, there's a problem with this referral. I'm going to suggest the administration amend it prior to the full legislature, and here's why. The tax assessment number on the referral, which ends in 44, is for 54 Seaview Drive, which is the address of the person who wants to buy the property at 62 Seaview Drive. The correct tax assessment number, just add a 1, it's 45 instead of 44, and that would make it for Seaview Avenue. However, that property is still assessed for $22,300, and yet you're selling it for far less. A little investigation shows that the house that was on that, the structure, was approved to be demolished by the Irondequoit Town Board in July of 2018, and apparently Irondequoit hasn't updated its tax assessment for the property because it looks like we want to sell it for a couple grand, not the $22,000 that it's assessed for. Are there any other issues with property? Is it common to have an issue like this with a property tax assessment after demolition's been done?
Through the president, that is not an uncommon occurrence when there's been a demolition and there hasn't been an update to an assessment, in a given municipality.
Thank you, Mr. President, the administration. Does that have any implications on like county repaying the town tax rate or assessed value or anything like that?
Through the president, I'm not sure what your question is. Certainly when whatever a property is assessed for and taxes aren't paid, the county is responsible for making, whether it's a town, a village, or a school district whole. So, you know, certainly it could cost the county money because of, non-updated assessments. We have numerous towns that, haven't done updates, and several this year that are rolling back assessments for the 2020 roll.
Through, Mr. President, through you to the administration, I'm going to suggest that you not only amend the referral to fix it, but I would also suggest that we figure out a way to get these towns to upgrade it so we're not handing them checks that they don't deserve. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0162, amend Resolution 397 of 2019 to amend and increase the contract with Siemens Industry, Inc. for the operation and maintenance of Monroe County's Iola cogeneration facility.
Move it, Mr.
Moved by
President.
Legislator Dondorfer, seconded by Legislator Lahenti. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Barroth?
Legislator Barra.
Yes. Through the president to the administration, does the increased contract amount mean that Siemens will complete these repairs?
Through you, Mr. President, again, this is Mike Garland from DES. Yes, Siemens would perform this work under this contract.
And through the president to the administration, will this work be completed this year? I mean, within the contract timeline?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, it will.
Thank you. And through the president to the administration, why wasn't this engine overhaul considered in the original 2019 contract?
Through you, Mr. President, this work was actually contemplated in the contract document. It was anticipated in our budget. However, this specific legislation gives us the authorization to be able to utilize Siemens to perform these overhauls.
Well, yes, but through the president, I mean, essentially what this means is back in 2019, we approved a contract that we knew was incomplete because we knew the engine overhaul would be required, yet the contract that we signed in 2019 didn't include it, and now we're being billed for $500,000. Am I incorrect in this assessment through the president?
Through you, Mr. President, no, we had anticipated that this work would have to be performed by the county as the owner. So this is not a surprise that this work would need to be done. We have planned for that work. It's just that this referral gives us the authorization to allow Siemens to perform that work.
So through the president to the administration, say Siemens wasn't involved, could we do this work ourselves then?
Through you, Mr. President, no, we cannot. This is very specialized work that Siemens is very familiar with as it relates to overhauls of these engines.
Right. And then back in 2019, we knew that we would be spending more than $1.2 million on this contract. We knew back in 2019 that we'd be spending an additional amount of money. It turns out $500,000. Isn't that correct through the president?
Through you, Mr. President, yep, as I said, the agreement contemplated this work, had an assigned value for this work, and that it would be ultimately a county responsibility to pay for that. But the way the specific legislation was crafted, it did not give the county authorization to utilize Siemens to perform that work. So that's why we're requesting the amendment tonight.
I understand. I'm just, and I'll stop here because you confirmed what I asked, and that is essentially back in 2019, we made a contract with Siemens, the sole provider, at least the person we were going to make the sole provider to provide the services for this facility, knowing that was going to be more than $1.2 million. But and we committed to Siemens anyhow, and now we're being asked to do more. Whereas back in the day, maybe we would have said something differently if we had known the full scope what was going to be required. I'll vote for this because clearly we don't have a choice, but I don't like that approach. I think if we're going to have a contract to maintain a facility, then we ought to know going into it what the cost is going to be, not have it, put in one dime as time goes by. That's just not a good way of doing business. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Legislator Brew. I have a question.
Go ahead, Legislator Brew.
Yes, through you, Mr. President, to the administration. How many buildings does the Iola facility actually supply in terms of electricity, heat, and chilled water?
Through you, Mr. President, 2 buildings, the community hospital and 111 Westfall.
Okay. And to the president, what type of engines are requiring to be rebuilt? Are they?
Through you, Mr. President, these are the 3 cogen units that have been operating now
2003.
Yeah, since 2003. And as you may recall, we have a 3-year agreement in place with Siemens. We do have a project that's contemplating moving the physical plant to the hospital campus. So we have a 3-year agreement in place with Siemens to continue their operation to provide electricity, steam, and hot water to the hospital and to 111 Westfall.
And through the president, a follow-up question. Do I understand that this plant will be moved, or is it going to continue to supply the utilities to those 2 previously named locations?
Through you, Mr. President, we have a new capital project that was approved through the CIP. That's a new physical plant that would be constructed, a new plant on the hospital campus.
Okay, through you, Mr. President, would that new construction be reusing these rebuilt cogen units?
Through you, Mr. President, no, they would not. This is work necessary just to keep the engines performing throughout the operational period.
Okay. And so what would you, through the president, I'm sorry, what would you consider the decommissioning date to be of the Iola cogeneration plant?
Through you, Mr. President, the end of 2022.
Okay, through you, Mr. President. So we're going to end up with some almost like new 3 cogen units as of 2022. Is there a form of a market for those through the administration, through the president to the administration?
Through you, Mr. President, we would certainly explore salvaging those engines, selling them in some manner and recouping value. Again, the work that's being done is really intended for their reliability. They're still old engines, but this is just necessary work to keep them, reliable. I wouldn't characterize them as being new at that point in their, it's like a vehicle. At a certain point, you've put a lot of money into that vehicle just to keep it running and reliable. These engines will be, have had a lot of hours on them and, would not be suitable for relocation, but there may be a market, or relocation to our new project, but there may be a market for these engines somewhere else.
Okay, thank you. And through the president, one last question. The contract ad is exactly $500,000. That just seems unlike most supplemental quotations from your typical contractor. Was there any logic regarding that very even numbered amount that was provided as a quote to the president?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, we had estimates for the work that would be required for various overhauls on the engine, and we added some contingency on it, and so decided just to round up to $500,000. So we didn't have to come back to the legislature to ask for additional funding.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0166, directing the clerk of the legislature to present referral 20-0028 entitled enacting a local law to amend local law number 5 of 1997, entitled authorizing lease to DePaul Adult Care Communities, Inc., intro number 42 of 2020, to the county executive in order to recommence the notice period for the public hearing to be held by the county executive.
Moved by legislator Taylor, seconded by legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, item carries.
All those in favor?
Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Yeah, I knew it was going to carry. Next item.
Referral 20-0167, acceptance of a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act Airport Grant Program related to the operation and maintenance of the Greater Rochester International Airport.
Move it, Mr. President.
By legislator Dondorfer, seconded by legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President, Legislator Boyce?
Yes, legislator Boyce.
Yes, through the president to the administration. Would this funding be able to help out if any of the restaurants or retail businesses are in economic strains because of the coronavirus?
Through the president, this is Andy Moore from the airport. The answer is yes. Hello?
Any further discussion?
No, thank you, Mr. Moore.
Any further discussion?
You're welcome.
Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Are there any other matters to come before the committee of the whole?
Yes, Mr. President. Legislator Baines.
Yes. Yes, legislator Baines.
I don't know the appropriate time for me to make a comment and express gratitude. Would this be an appropriate time, Mr. President?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I've been conducting classes online at Our Lady of Mercy. And
yes,
if any of you are running meetings online and organizing people online, it's extremely stressful. And I'd like to just say to the employees of the Majority Caucus and the Minority Caucus, and in particular to Clerk Jack, that putting up with people like me who really recently learned how to turn on a computer and run these meetings, I think it is stressful, and I'm very appreciative and thankful for the people who make us look, well, they don't make me look good because that's my job and I don't usually succeed, but I want to appreciate them for putting this together and making this possible for us to do our work in this fashion.
excellent comment. I agree 100%.
Second.
I see what they have to do to put this meeting together. It's remarkable. They do a great job, and I also can't thank them enough.
Can we have a round of applause?
Yay! Any other matters to come before the committee of the whole? Hearing none, the committee of the whole stands adjourned and shall rise and report in the same matter as the legislator's standing committees. The April 29th, 2020 special meeting of the legislature is reconvened. There being no unfinished business, Legislator Brew.
Yes, Mr. President, this honorable body stands adjourned until Tuesday, May 12th, 2020 at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.